Look, I know this is the third consecutive Miku figure I've reviewed, but I promise you that it will be the last for quite some time. Of the last 3 Miku figures I've received, this one was probably the one I was anticipating the most. More out of curiosity than anything else. For those of you unfamiliar, this figure by Alphamax is from one of my favourite songs in the Project Diva series, 2D Dream Fever by Polyphonic Branch. Not only is the song excellent, but the module design by Buzz is very cool and futuristic. With all those Miku figures out there, you'd think it'd be pretty hard at this point to create something unique, but that's exactly what Alphamax have done here, and it really comes down to the strength of the original design. But before we get to that, let's not neglect to talk about the box. It's actually quite well done. It's bright and colourful, it stands out, it contains all the info that you need to know, and the window isn't just a plain square, but instead there are a bunch of jagged edges, and the window even carries over to the other side of the box. And bonus points for including the original illustration. If I had to describe this sculpt in one word, I'd probably use flat. And no, I'm not just talking about her chest. Typically a flat sculpt would be a negative, but for this figure it's clearly intentional to stay true to the source material. It is 2D Dream Fever after all. Even her hair as you go down becomes flatter as well as translucent. I've loved the last 2 Miku figures I've reviewed, but they've both had blue hair, whereas this Miku's hair is very much green. Of course this comes down purely to preference, but I've always preferred my Miku hair green. In fact, I'd probably say this is more or less my ideal Miku hair. Miku's face is a little bit of a mixed bag. Unfortunately, I don't think they've recreated her expression 100% faithfully to the original illustration. The eyes on this figure are a bit too cold and lacking that expression and wonder or curiosity that we see on the illustration. Or at least that's my interpretation. Instead we get a gaze that's almost otherworldly thanks to a gape mouth and those green eyes with red pupils. It's actually kinda creepy. But it's not bad in its own right. This figure does have a sense of motion, but it's fairly subtle. The flap on the back of her jacket, the bow, and her flowing hair all add to that. Not to mention the use of video cables around her hair is a lovely touch. It can't be overstated how much it adds to the overall aesthetic. Typically Miku has a trademark number on her arm or shoulder, if at all. Some figures decide to omit it completely. However, on this particular design, it's actually on her cleavage. This along with her gaze adds just that hint of sex appeal. This is a simple but effective base. It doesn't look cheap, it's thematically appropriate, tasteful, and just in general, very cool. As they say, less is more. On an interesting side note, there are users on her MFC page saying that apparently she glows under a backlight. It does look that way in some of the photos, but I couldn't get it to work myself. If it is true though, then bravo Alphamax, I take my hat off to you. In fact, this is actually my very first Alphamax figure and I've been pleasantly surprised. Going off this figure alone, I wouldn't have any doubts about buying from them again. Overall, I'd say this figure actually looks better than the prototype. There's something about this figure that the photos can't quite capture, and while it's not mind-blowing in scale or ambitiousness, this is still a nice Miku for those interested, and it's something a little different from the norm. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and happy collecting. Bye-bye.